We'll call the City Council special meeting to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Steelgrave?
Yes.
Vining?
Here.
Excused?
Mayor Clark?
Present. So we have a special meeting before the work session, and that is intended to be a closed session, so I need a motion.
Your Honor, I'd like to make a motion to go into closed executive session to discuss land acquisition.
Second. There's a motion. There's a motion for Councilman Moore, supported by Councilman Felder, to go into closed executive session to discuss land acquisition. And please call the roll.
Councilperson Steelgrave? Yes. Vining?
Yes.
Jermaine?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Felder? Mayor Clark?
Yes. So we need a motion to go back into our special meeting.
Motion to go back into open session.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Moore, supported by Councilman Felder. Clerk?
Councilperson Steelgrave?
Yes.
Vining?
Yes.
Jermaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes, and now we need a motion to close the special meeting, correct?
Motion to adjourn the session.
Okay. Yes, do we?
So we're just gonna keep
We're just gonna keep going, oh yeah, we're gonna just keep going into the work session, that's right.
All right.
I apologize, thanks. Okay, so next on our agenda is the presentations for our work session component. Mr. Pastu, we have some items here.
Turn my mic on here. Mr. Lewis is going to give council an update where we are with the St. Mary's Garden project, but also some of the supply chain issues that we're finding coming to fruition with through the consultant or the engineer that we're working with on the design. So, and then at the end, we're going to talk with you about some acquisition of storm sewer main. But Patrick, if you just give them the update, and then we'll talk about the money aspect of it.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. Patrick Lewis, Director of Engineering and Public Services. Happy to be with you again here. I know it's been a few meetings, so I kind of miss you all. So tonight I've got a few topics on here. I know the first of which is St. Mary's Gardens project update. I'll try to be brief, but then I'm sure there may be some follow-up questions on that. As many of you know, I know Councilwoman Steelgrave is new since we've probably had the last update on this one. This is the comprehensive storm sewer, and it's eventually going to be a road reconstruction project in St. Mary's Gardens subdivision, mostly north of Hendricks. So that's kind of the Rosler, Lavender, John L., McCormick, Calgary. Those are the streets we're talking about here. So we're nearing completion of the final design on that. We had a design meeting a few weeks ago with Spicer Group, who's our design engineer. We're looking at, as I think we've mentioned before, one of the many problems here is that the storm sewers aren't deep enough to really collect that flow and get it so that it's not running backwards to the drain. So we're having to deepen a lot of these storm sewers in the area. We've settled long ago on having to do a stormwater pumping station, which we generally don't like to do, but there really is no other good option. So that pump station would be located in Calgary Park, which is not really a park anymore. It's open land. There's no facilities. So it'll be underground. We don't want to have a building. So basically what you've got is a 20-foot deep big box culvert almost. So something on the order of 12 by 12 size. It's going to be like a square box that we're going to set in the ground there, and the pipes are going to come into that, and we're going to have 4 decent sized pumps pumping that into the Mason Run drain. So with that, we're reviewing right now the individual storm runs from the pump station to those homes. Each one of the homes is going to be outfit. We're going to provide, like we did on some earlier jobs on Lavender Street, storm taps to every house, which will allow for their clear water discharge to be connected to those. We were initially hoping to get this project bid out this year. What we're finding is the biggest challenge we've got right now is the pump station in particular, but we've also got some of the larger diameter concrete pipe. You're looking at a month's worth of lead time. So that's our largest issue right now, is that we can't even get the materials for it because of that. Now, some of the smaller diameter stuff, your 18 inches, your 15 inches, we can get stock from the various concrete pipe suppliers. But that pump station is the biggest issue right now that we're dealing with. So the hope is we're going to try to get this to where we can start some work in the fall of this year, with the remaining work occurring in 2023. So I apologize for the delay in that. I don't know if I should stop there to see if we have any questions on the project in general.
Questions? Andrew?
Have we or do we need to make the residents in the affected area aware of this situation? And was there any expectation on their part that this project was going to be at any particular time? Did we give them a timeline in the past?
I believe the answer to that question is there probably is an expectation we'll do it in 22, because we've pretty much made that our goal right along. We haven't done a broad mass mailing or anything to the residents themselves, and part of that was we want to make sure we have something to tell them, because until we had firmly established a schedule, we probably are going to go out for bids, and then we'll have an idea on the contractor on the schedule. So whether it will be appropriate to tell them something before we bid the project or after, I guess, is a decision that council would have to help advise me on, but I would recommend at this point, we're close enough to final plan completion that we probably wait, and we can put it out for bids now for a project that would have a completion date of July of next year. There's nothing wrong with that. Because the second part of this discussion, which maybe I will morph into now, is what we're looking at doing is, because of the lead times, if we can even save a month on those lead times, and because unlike many of our construction projects, the value of the materials here is a fairly large proportion of it. Could be as much as 20% of the value of the job is in materials. So sales tax savings alone, if you can think about this, if the contractor has to pay sales tax, we don't. So we could do a direct purchase from the city of those materials and store those, which are large enough that they're not going to walk off, because that's the concern. We don't want to deliver a bunch of materials that somebody could just roll in a pickup truck and throw in the back and take off. You're not going to pick up concrete pipe without somebody noticing you. So we are contemplating doing a direct purchase to save tens of thousands of dollars on the sales tax, which also helps alleviate a little bit of that lead time, because if we place the order at the time we advertise for bids, we're going to save 4 to 6 weeks versus the time lag it would take to bid the job, get a contract signed, and the contractor to order them. So
I think that's really the essence of it is that, from where where we are with the design aspect of it, if we ended up, we're going to know what the quantities are. We can go out and do the purchase, and then contractor, you're using our supply here for your project, and we'll store it, and then you can start, whether it's this fall and finish it up in the spring. But it'll give us kind of a later summer type of bid that, because there'll be contractors looking for some work, and we've had some pretty mild Decembers that if they get started and get things going, they can move along pretty quick. So we think that may be the best alternative, is for us to come back to city council with the authorization to solicit bids for the purchase of the storm sewer main, and then we'll just store it on site. And again, as Patrick said, if you're looking at $1 million worth of pipe, $60,000, it's well worth it. But it also doesn't delay. So if you get a bid out later on and the contractor gets the award, guess what? They're going to have to wait a pretty extensive period based on the supply chain issue. So we can jump ahead and be ready for work potentially late this summer, early fall.
So Vince, what I hear you saying is, if we need to get it bid, because we want to find out who the bidder is and what the needs are within the materials, the city would purchase the materials and retain those until which the time the bids are, well, I guess, and then the bids, because we figure out when that start would be, but we'd have the materials, so it's less cost and saving time to when the project can initiate.
Yep.
Okay. Brian, and I'll go back to Andrew.
Thank you. I agree with Andrew. I just, once you have this firmed up, etched in stone, I think we should notify the neighborhood that this is what's happening, when it's going to happen, and kind of give them a step-by-step process from there. I agree with you. Wait until you have your all things said and done, and then move on from there.
Yeah, because the contractor, part of the challenge we're working with this year, as more so than any other year, is contractor availability, because this is a fairly large job. So we're not going to have a huge pool of local, there's our 2 big underground contractors we've dealt with, and there's probably some others that will get attracted attention here. But this is going to be something where a large contractor is going to have to fit it into their schedule. And if they say, we're not going to do a thing until next spring, but we're going to hit it hard and we're going to have 5 crews, that's one thing. Or if you've got another contractor that says, no, we're going to go slow and steady, but we're going to be on it for 8 months, that's a different message to the residents. So we need to, I think it would make sense in this particular case to know what our schedule is, rather than just say, well, it won't be 22 or it'll be late in the year. Once we have an idea, I think it's better to convey that.
I think we do have to manage some expectations that it's not going to get completed this year. But what we can do is, send a indication that we'll follow up with more details once the bids are received as to what that project schedule is going to look like. But I think the important thing for us tonight is to just give us the go-ahead to solicit bids for the materials, and that way we can have them get that aspect of it, and then get everybody understanding that we'll talk about when to bid this out so that we get the most competitive timing, if you will.
I don't think it's probably anybody's surprise that materials and logistics and obtaining is all pushed back. I think that's part of the message, not an excuse, it's just the reality of business. And by acquiring these, as the other backside of why we're acquiring here internally, is so we can move forward in the time frame instead of then putting out yet another 3 months further or whatever it could be. Michelle?
The pump house that we're gonna be installing, is that all part of this project, or is
Yes.
that a separate entity?
Nope,
Same
it's all part of
price?
this. It's all part of this project, but the complications, because that is the longest lead time, and you've got the pump equipment too. The challenge with that is that that really needs to be functional before it's not like we can put the pipes in and just feed it into a pump station and just say, okay, well, you're going to drain out in the old storm sewer system while we're waiting for the pumps to get installed. It won't work that way because of the places we've got to cross and pull out the old system. So that the pump station is part of the project, but that's almost a controlling factor on the lead time.
So that would be first?
I think they're going to have that at least built and a pump or two put in service here, because I don't know how we're going to maintain the existing system.
And that increases our costs by a lot, I'm assuming?
I mean, what if we were to put it in separately, or
The total project.
I could actually see, I'll interrupt here, but
go
actually
ahead.
that may work to our advantage, is that may be a good fall project because it's
Right.
located on a specific site. And so they can come in and hammer that out because it's going to be part of the whole bid package, the pump station as well as, the underground and the street work as well. But that may be one of those where I go, gee, we can get that done in the fall if the material is here and the order is out far enough in advance. And then they can do the underground work and tie it in. So
because they'll need to have, for that kind of depth, they'll need to have pretty large equipment. And so if frost becomes an issue, they'll already have the equipment there needed to dig through frost. They're not just trying to dig with a smaller excavator. They're going to dig with something bigger to dig a 20-foot deep hole, essentially. So, yeah, sorry, I didn't understand your question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think
Exactly,
it's a good process because work that can be done and any construction has disruption in the neighborhood. There's no question, but that has less disruption because of the location where that would be going in versus tearing the streets up and trying to wait to put pipe in after the winter or something.
Right.
Okay. Other thoughts?
So if you're okay with it,
Andrew
I'm sorry.
had a follow-up. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Could the material usage differ depending on the contractor's design, or is this all pretty standardized stuff?
It's going to be standard design, bid, build. So there could be modest tweaks of certain things, but we don't believe the trunk elements, the large diameter stuff, is going to change at all. Every so often you have to move a catch basin 5 feet this way or 10 feet that way. So there'll probably be minor field deviations, but no, it won't be a design build. It's not the contractor's design. It's our design.
Okay.
Good question, though.
And
Appreciate it.
then let me ask a silly one here. We're going to save money and lead time by purchasing our own materials and then giving that to the contractor to use.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're able to save sales tax, because as a governmental entity we don't have to pay that, why aren't we purchasing that material, concrete, steel, asphalt, for all of our projects? I know we did a little bit on the fire station when steel prices were surging, or at least purchase options or futures that would allow us to do that in the future.
That's actually a very good question. And the short answer to that is, and I didn't really get into this with this project because the rewards outweigh the risks. But on a lot of other jobs, I mean, if you have a $2 million street project, a lot of your materials are in things like your concrete, from Messina and things like that. It complicates things when we're buying materials because if the contractor places them, if there's a problem with that material, let's say he lays concrete down and it's defective. Contractor's going to point at us and say, well, you're the supplier. You bought it from Messina. It's not our fault. We finished it fine. It's the material issue. And so there is a danger for things like asphalt and concrete that are placed where you're talking about things like water main pipe that come to you essentially assembled. It is a possibility. But anytime, if there's any damage due to handling or things like that, it becomes an issue of whose fault it is, whose responsibility it is. So as the value of those materials go up, the savings becomes much, much more worth it for us to do what we're doing here. And I can't tell you for sure what the value of the materials on a water main job would be. That is something that we're starting to look at because the lead time is starting to be a governing factor. And we just had a meeting today at the Drain Commissioner's office talking about a large South County water main project. It cost them, he identified there was a 45-day delay. One of the review agencies, one of the cities had to look at the plans. 45 days cost them $800,000 in water main materials. So it is something we're going to have to look at for this year, but I wouldn't recommend it for things like surface construction. It would be where your pipe comes already assembled and your manholes.
The other thing I might mention, there's a couple of factors in play. One is the lead time. Two, we're in a point where, the design is pretty well known what that's going to be and the quantities known. A lot of times we're finishing design and going right into the bid process. But historically, that's worked fine because the materials were far more readily available. The other thing with it is this is a large project. This is, pushing $5+ million project, and the pipe itself is going to be in excess of $1 million. I'm not sure we do too many projects of that magnitude. And so those couple factors there really are what differentiates it from others where we could be doing, the acquisition of the water main. Now, if you have it done, designed quicker, and further in advance, you could consider that. But again, you're not going to see the same magnitude of savings that you would with this material.
If you save $5,000, for example, on sales tax, is it worth the risk to the city that the contractor is going to not take responsibility for if that water main fails a pressure test and they claim it's because of damage that the city had in handling the materials? So there's always a trade-off in there. But as you correctly identified, the larger the value of the materials, the more beneficial it would be for us to do that. So we'll look at that on any large-scale utility projects we have, because I think there is some logic. And I know Mr. Leroy does this. We do this all the time at water and wastewater plant where we'll buy the equipment. Because again, if the equipment's half the cost of the job, it makes sense for us to do that, save the sales tax, and we're willing to take some amount of risk of, contractor says, this doesn't line up here, you didn't order, it didn't come in exactly the way we thought, we had to make modifications to our design, here's a $5,000 extra. That's your risk. But on large value jobs, it's worth that risk, certainly.
Okay. So Vince, you're just, obviously this is a work session, we're not making decisions, but the point is you're looking to ensure there's not opposition to moving forward. And I haven't heard any opposition, but if so, the council can say that here at the
But
work
we'll
session.
follow up then with council regarding, the process going forward with, the soliciting the bids, but also the plan for notifying residents in the affected area.
Yeah.
So,
And the pre-purchase equipment stuff.
Yep.
So, okay. Thank you, Patrick.
Welcome.
And I think you may be standing there, but
I
next.
Brought my attachments.
just the Marion Drive, Patrick, I'll let you provide the background for this discussion.
I'm going to try to make this fast. I did in fact provide all that the background materials that I had, and that was the materials were mostly a cover letter along with petition, some cost estimates, a couple of really rudimentary construction layout drawings that I provided to Mr. Wells at 27 Marion Drive about 2 years ago. And I know he's asking about this again. Marion Drive is a private road, and most of the road is owned by one property owner. It's 24 Marion Drive, and that kind of makes an L, where the road's part of the L. There's two other properties, if you were to do this properly, that you'd need to extend to the east to pick up everybody's driveway, but it's primarily one owner we're dealing with. I should point out, one of the things I didn't point out is that we've got another iteration similar to this, and that's Blossom Lane by the old Baron Oil Crystal Flash, where you have 3 property owners that are landlocked, and then you have 2 homes on Front Street. So it's pretty similar to this, but you do have, there you've got plenty of width, and it's a single owner you're dealing with. But it's the same type of thing. You go down both those streets right now, they're a mud hole because no one's responsible for grading them. Typically, the city has, for first-time street paving, it's done usually by special assessment district, and that goes back 100 years, more than 100 years. You can see that in some of the old 100 years ago in the Monroe News. I saw a couple of old special assessment districts discussed in there. And the thought process is that if the first-time improvement isn't baked into the cost of the lot, so like in a subdivision, the developer puts the road in, pays the cost, and that's figured into the value that when you buy that lot. And the costs are not into these lots because it's a private road. There are challenges with Marion Drive because the property that traverses this is only 20 feet wide. And that's really about the minimum we'd want to have. By comparison, if you drive up G Drive, that's the kind of width you're talking about here. It's not a whole lot wider than that. So it's going to be very difficult for us to do. We could do it. The other issue that Mr. Wells brought up 2 years ago anyway, I know he was, with Councilwoman Germaini, I know he was focused mostly on the condition of the road, but we also have a shared private sewer that serves I believe it's 7 of the 9 properties. The 2 on Monroe Street, I think, have their own taps. So before we're going to pave a street, we really ought to deal with that issue as well. So converting that over to new public sewer. So I've got estimates for both of those in here. These estimates are probably considerably low because the costs in early 2020 were based on, I'll say, conventional inflation rates and contractor availability. So you can probably add 25% to these. So you're looking at an estimate that probably would have, is probably $250,000 for both projects. So you're looking at, if you were to special assess the entire cost, you're looking at $25,000 at least per lot. On sanitary projects, the city charter requires the council to kick in 1/6. And you're free to kick in, I mean, technically the council could pay the whole freight of this. I would not recommend that in any way, shape, or form based on consistency with the past. I'm not 100% sure what I would be advising you to do here because this comes up every so often, and I know it's usually I provide the answer to the residents and they say, I understand there's not much the city can do with it. If they really want to do this and more than half of them sign the petition, we can take this a step further and look into a little more details and see about getting an easement from the property owner. So I guess it's a question of how strongly the council wishes to pursue this matter, but even if you only assessed half of this, you're talking about some fairly prohibitive assessments here. And even if you span them over 10 years, they're still paying over $1,000 a year.
With the 7 properties that are there, if there's a petition, it's those 7 that would be to be asked, or would the 2 that face Monroe Street also be part of that?
Typically, we would assess on benefit. And since the 2 homes on Monroe Street utilize Marion for their garages, their driveways come off of Marion Drive.
Okay, so it would be.
We would. Now, where it gets even more complicated is that historically we've assessed based on frontage. It's not one lot, one assessment. It's if you have more frontage, you pay a higher assessment for street paving. Now, utilities, it's one house, one residential equivalent unit, one assessment.
So it's 9 properties. Also, part of this, and I think it was in one of the renderings that you sent along, that there's got to be access for public safety vehicles, fire, and that at the end. Does that go beyond the, I'll say, the blue line of the outline? Does that get into other property? Is there acquisition items there, or it goes back into those, I'll say, parking garages or house, I guess it is now there?
Well, the way I've got it sketched up on the attachment is is wholly contained within the Marion Drive residence. Okay. But could you pursue an easement because there's commercial apartment buildings behind it? Mm-hmm. You could even, in theory, negotiate an access easement so that this is no longer a dead end if you wanted to. Right. But these are all things that are on the table. But I, for simplicity's sake, we kept it contained within the residence affected.
All right. Let's see if there's any questions or thoughts on this. And Michelle, you obviously have had conversation with a resident, so.
So I guess my question is, if someone solely owns that road, that's the person that really we have to get the permission from, correct? Yes. And what's the next step?
Well, the next step would be finding out, would probably be having some kind of informational meeting with the residents. We typically like to have a petition signed by, if not a majority, at least a decent number. What we don't want is 1 or 2 residents bringing it up, and then we get 7 hostile ones in here. They're saying, why are we even talking about this? So the petition is usually intended to show a degree of support with the understanding that a lot of times, and we haven't done a lot of special assessments lately. We did a lot of alley pavings and things like that and new sanitary sewers in my first 10 to 15 years here with the city. And what we'd often get is we'd get a majority of people would sign the petition, and then we'd come in here, we'd lay out a rough design, because you could usually design what you want to do. Here, it's not clear, because to do the T turnaround at the end, you need to negotiate those easements. Yeah. But assuming this is what we want to do, you bring them in and they say, okay, well, here's our estimate on the cost. And they go, whoa, wait a minute. We didn't sign up for that. So we like to at least have some kind of, that's why the letter, the attachments, the rough estimates that go with this is important to be presenting to a lot of the residents there so that they know what they're asking for. It requires a 5-2 vote of council to confirm any special assessment district. So, there has to be a strong working majority of council that wants to pursue this as well, because it will be unless the council is prepared to spend this kind of money on one location that, and quite frankly, I feel for the residents, I understand it, but they also bought the lots knowing full well that was a private road. So it's not like this is a situation, and there's no original owners left. So it's not like this is a situation that wasn't known. And we're more than willing to, I'm always in favor of capital improvements when we can do them, but we need to keep that in mind too, that this is not an unknown situation.
Other questions? Andrew?
So in terms of support for the project, is it solely this particular resident, or have we received support or interest from other residents? Only the one?
For what it's worth, I know a fair number of the ones down there, if you can believe it. One of them, former Councilman Beneteau, owns one of the properties. I talked to Lisa Annenberg. She's another, she owns property in Monroe, or she lives in Monroe Township. She owns one of the homes on here. And she was one of my math counts volunteers last week. So we talked about it over breakfast, and her attitude was, yeah, it'd be nice, but I don't think any of us want to pay for it. Now, she's speaking for herself, and I know, like I said, there's a couple more that I know who they are. One goes to church with me, and we've sort of had the same conversation over the years. Yeah, it'd be nice, but we understand. So I don't know if that's a proper gauge. It's completely anecdotal, but
I anticipate that she's correct, though.
yeah.
I mean, if there is more expressed interest and you wanted to bring them in and say, okay, but here's what it would take, and at that point, if there's support and say, hey, it's going to be $1,000 for 10 years for every single household in this room, and they say, okay, it's worth it to us, let's go forward,
Sure.
Then I'm happy to have this conversation, but it sounds like we're not there yet, so.
No, it doesn't sound like we are, and that's, I think, part of me, it's telling that the petition hasn't been returned after 2 years with any signatures, but again, the last 2 years has been such upheaval, it's hard to say why that could be, but that's why I want to make sure we put it back in his hands again, and if you'd like to circulate that to his neighbors, we like these to be grassroots started, because we don't want to be playing the heavy and saying, we want this for you, and be perceived as doing the bidding of one or two property owners only. That's my concern.
That said,
Yes.
does the owner of this road at this time have any obligation to maintain its condition in some way, shape, or form?
Being a private drive, that's going to be my question as well, the private drive, who shares in that, or Mr. Buds, now we're getting over to the attorney here, but I guess it's theirs to live on and theirs to manage amongst themselves as residents that live there. Though when you look at the map, there's one resident in particular that owns most of the extension out to Monroe Street.
So, Your Honor, what I would say is my favorite attorney answer of all of it depends, right? I'm not aware of there being any recorded easements, that would talk about the mutual use and those sorts of things. So then you kind of get into equitable concepts of, okay, who's using, on whose property it is, for whose benefit it is. And I think, not my position, but if I were in a position to be making that decision, right, if this goes to a court and the judge has to say, okay, what way would that come down? I think the most likely way that would go is, all right, who has what percentage of the benefit, much like we would talk about in determining a special assessment district. And okay, if this needs to be maintained for the collective good, then collectively there should be some contribution to that. That would be my expectation for how that would likely occur.
With no association present that we're aware of, there's no means of collection, there's no method of collection, and so we're right back to here. So
if I could go back, not being the city attorney, into developing these kind of things, when you have this come up, you normally come up with an easement agreement that says, okay, this property will bear 12.4% of the cost, this property will bear 15% of the cost, that type of thing, in the event that these need to happen, or you create some sort of mechanism that looks like an association out of the easement, and here's how people will contribute. But to my knowledge, I don't think we have any of that we're aware of at this point.
no, we do have a water main easement, because we do have a public water main there. So, but that doesn't require us to maintain it. It just allows us access to replace that and maintain our facility, and that's it. So, about the only thing I'm confident is that landowner doesn't have the right to cut off access. That's about the only thing that I can really say for certain, but it's sanitary sewer is similar to private sewers. Who has responsibility for fixing the pipe? Whoever has the lowest basement is usually the answer to that question. So probably in this case, it's whoever gets mad about the road first and decides to hire somebody to come and grade it. That's who's responsible for it. So it's kind of a flippant answer, but
Other questions? Now, I know we have a couple items, at least one for sure that we're going to want to discuss. Okay, thanks, Patrick. Mr. Pastu, the next one, Willow Vine?
Contained in the packet is a analysis regarding a two-way conversion of Vine and Willow. Again, having been down this path before with Cass and Harrison, while we think there has, from a traffic standpoint, merit to it, we also know there's political considerations that go with these decisions. I do think that if you would give it some consideration at a minimum, I would hope that you would give thought to the section between Macomb and Monroe as a two-way conversion. But since we're looking at doing the project starting with Vine this year,
we've got both West Willow and East Willow, the first block between Monroe and Tremont. So basically, Willow from Godfrey to Tremont is getting done this year.
Yeah.
So we needed to make a decision. So it's the block by the farmers market and then everything west of Monroe Street. So we are actually widening Willow from 24 to 26 so that it could facilitate this. And I think there's a general understanding there's a little bit of congestion around SMCC. So there aren't big trees in the area right now on West Willow, so we can move that curb line a foot out on either side, but we'd be doing the reverse on the block by the farmers market. That block is 32 feet wide for no apparent reason at this point, and it's in terrible shape. So that actually would help us grade that quite a bit in that we could make that terrace not quite so steep, because as it is now, the road, the cross-section cuts it in deeper than it would need to if you narrowed that street up by 3 feet. So it'll blend a little bit better than it does now. So that's partially what's driving this decision, is the need to establish the proper geometry. But part of that consideration too is if you are going to consider converting these streets to two-way, it would be a benefit to have Vine two-way during the time Willow's under construction. So if we're looking at it, this would be the optimum time to do it, so that way we have some additional routes in and out of the neighborhood. So.
Do the residents know that we're widening the street? Do they know this yet or not?
I haven't told them. With a fairly token, I mean, it's really not a big. If the council wishes, I'll let them know. But I mean, this is kind of within those parameters of. I mean, we're going that much wider on the lawn area.
I just know what happened before, and I don't want that repeated. That's all.
I think most of it's going to be on the south side, though, isn't it?
No, we got
You got to take a foot on the.
Yeah, we got a foot on both sides.
All right.
East Willow, it's a reduction.
A reduction. We'll go from 32 to 26.
So I wrote one note, which of course ties to Michelle's here, the communication plan with the residents. And if it's east of Monroe Street, it's probably residents and business. If it's discussion on the west side, it's residents, school, and business. So just.
We did reach out to the school to get basically to find out what they're busing. They're really just using a bus. From my recollection, I had my project engineer took the lead on that communication with the school, and they didn't seem to have any big needs. I mean, that block of Willow between St. Mary's and Monroe Street, if we want, we can also treat that like we've done some other ones where we roll our infamous "Do Not Enter" sign out there too during school hours, and that's realistically most of the rest of the day. There's not a lot of activity, so. Going back to the communication plan, if it's a desire of council that I reach out ahead of the project starting and let them know we're widening it from 24 to 26, I can certainly do that. Maybe I didn't put enough importance on that, as I don't want to put you all in a bad position if we don't reach out. But there's a fine line between providing way too much communication either. I don't know how I'm trying to say. I'm not saying it very well, but I don't want. Sometimes I think I communicate too much to all of you. That's certainly the case. But
Being widened by a couple feet or lessened by a couple feet would accommodate if there was a change. But if it's not a change, it accommodates the flow. It doesn't inhibit the flow that's wider, and it accommodates the flow that is
Right.
really a narrower street comparably.
It will, taking it to 26 feet where it's 24
Yeah.
allows for a little extra space between parked cars because you do have a high traffic generator there at the school. So it wasn't being done just, and maybe that's where I'm misunderstanding. It wasn't being done just because we're looking at converting it to two-way.
That's the question.
No, that decision was made independent of this. So maybe that's the message that,
So then that's the message I think that the councilman was asking, is at least they know that it's coming. They'll see, well, geez, it looks wider, it looks narrower. Why? It's just, and we've done it on other streets as well. And I think that sometimes we're assessing those as we're doing projects, probably here for the past few years.
Yeah.
So, okay.
sorry for the confusion on that one.
But a communication with that included would be beneficial. Other questions or comments? Brian?
Yeah, I don't think widening or narrowing the lanes is going to make that big of a difference to the neighbors. I think the major concern would be one-way to two-way. That, I think, would be problematic, very problematic.
I'm not married to any particular concept, but if we're looking at doing it, this would probably be the optimum time.
Yeah, like I said, widening or narrowing, I don't think that's a big deal. I think it's more, 'cause especially if you're talking about a very minimal amount. I don't think that's that big of a deal. But I think that I think definitely the one-way to two-way would definitely present some problems with the neighbors.
I think it would require more, obviously, a different conversation.
Absolutely.
So that would have to be the start point, if a consideration. But I agree, the widening or lessening by what we're talking about is information to be shared, but it's just for design reasons and purposes. And then if we get to that other discussion, I think that's a different communication. So yeah.
I'll do whatever you would like on either of those fronts.
Okay. Oh, Andrew.
I would echo the comments of the other council members that have spoken regarding, wanting some input from the community members in the school and the high school there as to what they would like to see with the direction of the streets. But regarding the widening, as long as there's not a huge impact to the trees, I'm okay with. The narrowing, I'm not. I understand that the professional advice regarding road diets points in that direction, but I'm not sure that I'm entirely sold on it, especially after what happened in Maywood. Especially as residents are coming to me, on the Trails Commission and elsewhere and asking for why can't we have more bike lanes? And a lot of times the response is, well, we don't have enough space on the streets to put more parking and put two-way traffic and to put bike lanes. This would be a place where they could go if we're not using that for something else. I'm not really super excited about the prospect of paying extra money to narrow up the streets. So I can say, I can't speak for the rest of the council. I can say I'm not a fan of that. But
It's a cost savings, actually,
Yeah.
because we're going from 32 to 26. The only thing I'd say about the bike lanes is I think in general, I would certainly agree with the goals of that, but this section of Willow doesn't connect to anything useful as far as a bike facility, because once you cross Tremont, it narrows up to 24 feet, and it's the one that's got sidewalks right off the back of curb. So and Tremont isn't very good for a bike route either. It's going to be difficult to facilitate any real bicycle traffic on this block. So it's overly wide right now, especially if the street remains one way. And we've heard concerns of people speeding around that block because a 32-foot wide street one way with parking on both sides leaves you a 16-foot path right in the middle to go as fast as you can on that block. So that was another part of the reason. But I think if it was connecting to something that was a little more meaningful, I would probably be looking at to incorporate some kind of bike lane or bike facility in that road project. But it's a 500-foot block that narrows down at the other end. So I guess we didn't look at that as being a major concern. We certainly can if council would like me to.
I think the point's well taken. I think with the Trails Committee, they're really kind of taking a large view of how do we connect from A to B, where's the cross streets, where would the best locations be for the continuation trail and bike lanes. But I agree that I don't see that to be a street that's going to be, because it's an individual street versus connecting to what's currently here, and it's not getting you in a direct fashion to whether it's coming from 7th Street in Kaylani and trying to figure out how you're going to get out to Sterling State Park on the Heritage Trail. So what's that route? It's probably not going to be, I understand your point is when we're having these discussions on streets, is it potentially within the area of what that's going to be? And I think that's where the conversation needs to be shared about that. And I think that the Trails Committee hopefully will be able to look at the maps and say this is the route. So I know we have about 3 minutes, and I know we have one other item, so Mr. Pastu might give us a minute just as an update. I think.
Thank you all for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Actually, I was not ready to
Right.
hand out the
That's-
goals and objectives for tonight, so I was working on them and got sidetracked a bit, but
Mr. Pastor and I did talk about that because of the notes and information from our meeting, and yet that's forthcoming as we move forward with that. So unless there's other comments, we just have a minute here or so moving into the regular meeting. No, okay. At this time, we'll just close the work session, and we've got 2 minutes, and we'll be back for the regular meeting. I see we have a couple guests.
It would be. Exactly. I didn't mention it. I was thinking, yeah. What's that? Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so we're here. We're ready to go. So at this time, we'll call the city council meeting to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Steelgrave. Vining. Here. Maney. Here. Lamore. Present. Felder. Present. Whitman.
Excused. Present. I would ask we all please rise for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Deliberations and discussions this evening, may our efforts promote the good of the residents of this city and all who visit.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Clerk, next item, please.
The next item is the approval of the regular agenda.
See if there's any amendments or changes to the agenda. Okay.
Do we need a motion to
Yes,
approve
we
it?
do. Yes, Councilwoman Finn.
Second.
Councilwoman Vining, supported by Councilman Lamore, we approve the regular agenda. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Steelgrave? Yes. Vining? Yes. Jermaine?
Yes,
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes. Next item, please.
The next item is the consent agenda, and for item B, approval of payments to vendors, the amount should read $922,258.29, 922,258.29.
Thank you. Are there any items on the consent agenda that council wishes to have pulled for further discussion? Any items on the consent agenda? Any items on the consent agenda? I'm sorry. Councilman Felder, I apologize.
Yes, item 3437.
My apology. Are there any, any items on the consent agenda those present here this evening wish to have pulled for further discussion? Seeing none, motion be in order on the consent agenda. Councilman Felder?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I'd make a motion that all items on the consent agenda not pulled for further discussion be accepted, placed on file, recommendations carried out, and resolutions adopted.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Felder, supported by Councilman Lamore, that all items on the consent agenda, absent the one pulled for further discussion, be accepted, placed on file, recommendations carried out, resolutions adopted. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Steelgrave?
Yes.
Vining? Yes. Jermaine?
yes,
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes. Councilman, I'm sorry, Clerk Lavoy?
The next item is item 3433, Cody presentation 2020.
They haven't pulled. Oh, I'm sorry.
What
It
does it
goes,
go to?
I apologize. See, sooner or later, I'll get this corrected. Councilman, I'm sorry, Clerk Treasurer Lavoy
I wrote
and
it down and
it's already under
underlined
the council action item. Thank you. Clerk, I'm sorry I interrupted.
No,
Please
you're
go ahead.
fine. So the next item is 3433, Cody presentation 2021.com award presentation.
Thank you. I see Mr. Leroy is coming up and Mr. Egan.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, Brian Egan, Commission on the Environment. We had made a notification to you last fall that the River Raisin Legacy Project documentary film, the short documentary film, won a .com award. We're here tonight to actually present the award itself that came. I'll pass it around. It's pretty heavy, so make sure you don't drop it. The .com award is an international competition of excellence on web and other media types, and we received gold in this, so we're very proud of it. And I will give this to Clerk Chet and turn it over to Barry.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. I just wanted to say thanks to City Council and City of Monroe, as well as the Commission on Environment and Water Quality, which both Brian and I are members of, as well as Councilman Felder, Millward Boudry, Butch Ewell, I'm blanking on the other ones.
Ed Kane.
Ed Kane and Dan Stefanski and Dick Micka. But just for allowing us to be able to pursue that. This was through grant funded through the PAC support grants through the state of Michigan Department of Eagle. And this just upholds honesty and trust that we're trying to, I guess, document and preserve what's been done for the environment in the River Raisin. So it's just showing that the city's accountable and that trying to earn respect and be value-centric. So, but anyway, just thank you.
Well, don't leave yet.
Any questions? or-
Yes, I was going to ask, any questions from council? Before I see if there's any questions, I do want to make a comment. I think it's a great work, and I want to thank Mr. Egan. He is the chair of the Commission on the Environment and Water Quality. Of course, Mr. Leroy is the staff representative, and they both serve on the commission together with vote. I see in the back Mr. Mick is here also. He serves on the commission as well. A lot of great work, and I think that's much that the commission has done for the community and a residents that serve on there and others to make the water quality, the improvements, the brochures, the legacy project. This is well recognized for the hard work in which they do. And this is a recognition not only for the Commission on Environment, for all of council and councils past and present with the support of that and putting policies in place, but giving the work to the commission to get it done, which is why they received the great recognition. If you haven't seen the video, please make sure you view it in entirety. It's a message of our legacy, but also as our moving forward. Mr. Egan?
I was just going to say, yeah, this work has been 30 years or more in the process, but it just demonstrates the positive hard work that this community and stakeholders have put into a federally identified issue of the River Raisin being an area concern. So as Councilman Felder knows, and Mr. Micka and the rest of us, we hope to delist the River Raisin as soon as possible, but we're in a monitoring phase and we hope that day will come soon.
Thanks for mentioning that, because Councilman Felder is also a voting member on the Commission on the Environment, and he's the council, not liaison, but voting member. As we know, our boards and commissions, some of our council members serve on those boards, and some we serve as liaison to bring information back. So Councilman Felder was also here in his term, some of the progress we've made as well. So it's great. I know that there's discussion about funding on areas of concern, the opportunities through the federal agencies to continue this progress. I was pleased to be contacted. I appreciate Mr. Egan for sending something to me from the EPA this past week or so, but also received it also from the Michigan Municipal League to provide a statement on behalf of the city, the importance of the funding that comes for this type of work. And while we've benefited to where we're in our area of concern, we're now kind of in the observation stage, and now it's, but others should have that equal opportunity to improve their waterways and stuff. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Right? Congratulations. Thank you. Clerk, next item on presentations, communications, public hearings.
The next item is item 3436, public hearing on the capital improvements program fiscal years 2022 through 2028. And there are no comments on file in the clerk's office.
Okay, very good. At this time, I'll open the public hearing on item 3436, public hearing on capital improvements program fiscal year 2022 to 2028. Any comments from those present here this evening regarding the public hearing on capital improvements program? Seeing no comments, I'll close the public hearing. Clerk, next item, please.
Council action, it's item 3403, fiscal year 2022 through 2028 capital improvements program budget.
Thank you. Mr. Pastou, I don't know if there's any introduction. I know that council members, we've had a work session on this and some discussion regarding the capital improvements.
Thank you, Your Honor. You briefly, last Monday night, the Citizens Planning Commission held their public hearing, usually later than normal, but certainly with the Omicron variant, they rescheduled the January public hearing. We reviewed with them almost $32 million in proposed projects for the upcoming fiscal year, but also looked into the 5 succeeding years as well and identified a number of projects. They did ask a few good questions related to the dollar amount and indicated that, we're generally somewhere in the $8 to $10 million range year after year, but given the fact that the voter-approved millage, provided like $1.8 million additionally for road work. That's incorporated into the CIP for the succeeding years. We received a little over 11.4 million in the ARPA funds, of which are programmed in there. And then, we put $10 million into a program planning budget for the police station, of which, we would pursue further with looking into that feasibility. So big numbers, at least for this next year. But as I told the Planning Commission, you got 22 million of it's already in cash to work with. So, but also, again, going forward, there's some large projects in the succeeding years as well. So.
Thank you, Mr. Pastor. There may be some questions from council on this. I know it's up for action here to adopt this capital improvements program budget. Mr. Pastor, I know you've chatted with the council, myself. This obviously is a capital improvement program plan. As you said, you alluded to some of the funding is there, some maybe later. Well, it shows the 32 million. There's those that are lined out within the various funding locations of projects that we know are already at least moving forward. My question, if I look through this correctly, because the ARPA funding that was part of this, you can see as council saw the notations. I appreciate that. Tells us where the funding is coming from, and I think as I added about $9 million of the funds available. So there's still ARPA funds that the city is considering for other projects and use as well, correct? Okay. I don't know if there's any specific items. Councilwoman Viney?
I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me right now. Did you mention the library project?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Regarding the Opportunity Center, Councilwoman. And
Our Library Opportunity Center, it's not contained in that amount, although I will tell you in the presentation to the Citizens Planning Commission last week, I did identify the $8 million associated with that to look for the funding, from various sources. So they know it's there. It's just not formally put into the program at this point in time. And the context of it too is when we were developing the CIP back in the early fall, we were just getting the architect's planning analysis, if you will, and so it was still somewhat. I'm not going to say a mystery. We didn't know what we were looking at, and it came in a little bit after the deadline for submission. But clearly they're aware of it, and it was presented as a footnote. Yep.
So as I see on here, it under the economic development, it has the Opportunity Center and of our library expansion for a amount of what that may be. The fiscal year request has a no funding request because, as you said, we're looking into some alternative funding for that at this time with some, I'll just say various federal and state funds that are becoming available and how we try to find the right place in which we make that ask. So Councilman, your point's well taken. It is listed, but it doesn't have a funding out of the capital improvements dollars because we're looking at as other funding. Very much similar to what the station would be.
And if I may just add to also a similar project that the funding source hasn't been defined was the discussion with the Planning Commission, the 10 million that's in there for the police station. The question is, well, isn't that a little premature? You'd certainly probably need voter approval for a bond issue. And I said, yep, but I did put that in there to send the message out there. We got to look at this project. I do think long-term it's something the council needs to, and the community needs to consider, and it's there to get your attention. And they acknowledge that it did get their attention, but it's still, it's listed as a program cost, but certainly not going to happen until we've get the funding in place for that. So.
I have a couple items I'd like to review, but I don't want to give council opportunity also. Oh, okay. Councilman Feller, you have an item, and then I have a list of things too.
I do. I think it's well known by council, and in one of our previous work sessions that I brought up one of the items and wanted to have more discussion, especially surrounding the funds allocated to the battlefield education complex and the Heritage Master Plan in general and our role in that and what we saw as our role in that. And like I said in the past and will continue to say, I think that we are a partner in this plan. I just want to ensure that city residents are not left shouldering the burden for the whole thing. So I hope that we can continue having those discussions in the future, but I do have opposition to some of those expenditures included in tonight's report.
I know we're still working on a date, but go ahead, Mr. Pastu.
Yeah, and if I may, again, this is a planning document. It's not appropriation or anything of that magnitude. You are going to have to act upon a proposed budget here in April. But this gives you, it's more of a planning document, but you may see those details will obviously, a number of them will likely be in there in the proposed budget, but also when we get our work session scheduled for further discussion, that may affect how the final budget comes to be adopted. So, but again, keep in mind, this is a planning document. The appropriation is taking place in a separate action by City Council.
So I'll just a couple items, and I think it's more so because those that are present, but also those that are either watching or will watch our council meeting, because some of the items that we've had conversation here at our meetings. And the first one, the Martin Luther King Bridge, which has funding of $100,000 general fund for necessary repairs. But as we've found, and maybe I'll let Mr. Pastus speak to this, that the funding is could be significantly more, but there's items in consideration with the river and how it cleans up, all those type of things. But kind of, this is the start point to make sure we do that correctly.
Again, we at the time of the submittal, we didn't really have the estimated cost from, was it Fishbeck? Or, yeah, okay. Our consulting engineers, Fishbeck, on that. Ultimately, their recommendation, I shouldn't say recommendation, their estimated cost to really do pretty significant renovation, addressing a number of deficiencies with the bridge, but also some, aesthetic improvements as well, was a little over $550,000 was my recollection. And so we put 100 in there as a start. We may in the future have to look at a little bit more and see some other funding alternatives as well. I think if there's something, if there was an amendment, we'd put the 550 in there thinking, okay, we may have to get some grant money to figure out how to take care of that. And I'm sure there's some funding out there we might be able to find. So.
And I guess the point is, as it's been discussed here before, and the council's had this on our list about how do we make the repairs, we make them necessary to make sure we do it correctly the first time as opposed to coming back later with that because of some of the work that needs to be done. And it's not just the walk portion of the bridge itself, it's also each end of the bridge and the cement work and the making the ability to use more compliant for whether it be ADA or just general use. So there's a larger portion to that as well. The next one I had, I know that we talked about it at a work session a little bit with the trail development, and there's some funding in there, but they're really in the early stages of developing a concept and a plan. But if council I know has seen, and others may be asking about that, it's part of the funding that's coming from the capital millage there, but there's additional funds in years to come in the long-term planning about the trail development. We're really in the early stages of that. I did notice on your, one of the items on here about dumpsters, I can't remember where it actually is, dumpster enclosures, I think, which is great. Just as a thought, and it might be funding that comes from the funds that are, I know, held by the Community Foundation in Woodland Cemetery. I didn't see that as a list of one of the locations, but I would think that there might be funding available through our, I'll say the Residents Trust, the funds that were put in there to take care of Woodland Cemetery for long term. And just as a side note, something maybe to think about as we make sure we retain responsibilities that we have to do that. And that's come up in the past about the dumpsters that are there, and in a simple platform and enclosure I think it would say enhance that for the visitors that are coming to see their past loved ones, and it is our historic cemetery as well. I think that's the main ones I had. I'll see if there's other questions. Again, I bring those because I know that there's a conversation been at the council meetings, and so those that can see this on the city's website for the capital improvements. There may be, there's a long, I'll just say, there's a long list of projects that are on here and where the funding comes from and what years funding, how much is being put together in this capital project. And at the far end, it talks about where some of those alternatives of funding sources are coming. So that's my final comments on the capital improvements item. So it is up for council action. I'll see if there's any other comments. Councilman Moore, go ahead.
Just make a motion to adopt fiscal year 2022-2028 capital improvements program budget.
There's a motion by Councilman Moore, supported by Councilwoman Germaini on item 3403, the fiscal year 22 to 28 capital improvements program budget. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Steelgrave?
Yes.
Vining?
Yes.
Germaini?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes. Next item, please.
The next item is item 3448, proposed ordinance 22-001, an ordinance to amend chapter 127 of the retirement system ordinance of the code of the city of Monroe, up for its first reading.
Mr. Pastou, comments?
The ordinance here is actually one identical to what we looked at last fall. We asked council to pull this from action. We wanted to look at it again, but essentially employees hired after January 1st of this year or rehired after shall no longer be eligible to participate in the city's retirement system. That would be the pension defined benefit program and so it'd be applicable to employee group, the non-union groups, City of Monroe Employees Association, or COMEA 1, the general employees, and the COMEA 2 and Teamsters bargaining unit. The second portion is the voluntary opt-out of the retirement system for vested employees. Employees exercising this option could transfer 150% of their accumulated contributions to the defined contribution plan, which is being now administered by the Municipal Employee Retirement System in Lansing. The third aspect of it, voluntary opt-out for the unvested employees. They would have the similar option as the vested employees at 150% of their accumulated contributions. And then lastly, it does allow for non-union employees that accept retirement incentives to continue work, but will no longer be members of the retirement system. So we still have a few employees that retired and are working on employment agreements, but they're no longer members of the retirement system and not going to receive any additional benefit, any accrued time of that nature. And so what that last piece is. So we're asking council to schedule a public hearing for March 7th at 7:30 for that consideration.
Thank you. There's no questions. Look for.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion that proposed ordinance 22-001, an ordinance to amend chapter 127 retirement system ordinance of the code of the city of Monroe, be placed on the floor for its first reading and schedule the public hearing and second reading for Monday, March 7th, 2022.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Moore, supported by Councilman Felder regarding item 3448, proposed ordinance 22-001 as stated, up for its reading. Clerk?
Councilperson Steelgrave?
Yes.
Vining?
Yes.
Germaini?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes.
Ordinance 22-001, Chapter 127, Retirement System Ordinance. An ordinance to amend Chapter 127, Retirement System Ordinance of the Code of the City of Monroe, Michigan.
Thank you. Next item, please.
The next item is 3451, consideration to approve employment agreement with Lauren Bennis, building official.
Mr. Pastou?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm asking the City Council to approve an employment agreement with Lauren Bennis to serve as the building official as part of our succession planning. If you recall, the incumbent, right, or the now retiree functioning on the employment agreement, Bill Greenhall, is scheduled to depart April 1st of this year. Mr. Bennis, who meets the qualifications for the position, has been with the department for a number of years, requesting that he meet that appointment. And the agreement is essentially almost identical, other than a couple, I think, changes with the job description that Mr. Greenhall had with his employment.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Pastou? I appreciate the the agreement, how it's stated, and what placement on the pay grade, and within line with the compensation study and
Yep,
the
absolutely.
position.
Yep, yep.
All right, Your Honor, I make a motion to approve the employment agreement with Lauren Bennis to serve as the building official and authorize the city manager to sign the agreement on behalf of the city.
Second.
Motion by Councilwoman Moore, supported by Councilwoman Stilgrave on item 3451, consideration to approve the employment agreement with Lauren Bennis. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Steelgrave? Yes. Vining?
Yes.
Jermaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes. Please.
The next item is item 3453, consideration to approve demolition proposals 929 East 9th Street.
Thank you, Your Honor. We're asking council to approve a demolition proposal received by Vincon Inc. in the amount of $15,160, just a little bit of my $15,000 purchasing threshold. It's a property located at 929 East 9th. A couple of hearings were held related to the demolition, and at this point in time, we're ready to move forward with it. I think there's a little more environmental work to be done before the demolition, but it's in a condition that met the dangerous structure requirements or ordinance associated with it.
Thank you, Mr. Pastor. I know that the council's had this conversation. We were in the process of getting these contracts signed for those that were identified previously on the list, so I appreciate the administration moving forward on getting this started. Any comments from council? None, a motion be in order.
Make a motion to accept and award the demolition proposal submitted by Vincon Incorporated in the amount of $15,160 for the home and site restoration located at 929 East 9th Street.
Motion by Councilwoman Moore, supported by Councilwoman Germaine on item 3453, the approved demolition proposal as stated. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Steelgrave?
Yes.
Vining?
Yes.
Jermaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes.
Right, and one more item, item 3437, which was pulled from the consent agenda, OPR exemption certificate transfer resolution for 118 West Front Street.
Thank you. Councilman Felder, question or comment?
Question. It is generally my understanding for obsolete property rehabilitation exemptions that there is some investment in the property that is made, and generally an older property, and then we give a tax exemption to the property owner, or don't tax the improvements that are done, bringing the building up to code or whatever, on the premise that they have to, because they are investing in a historic building, to not make it a tax burden to them because of the investment that they're having to go towards. But at this point, it looks like that building was sold, another person bought it, and now we are transferring the tax exemption to the person that did not make the investment. And so that's sort of my question of how close I'm getting there. I know Mark Cochran isn't here this evening, but
Well,
that's my understanding of how these things usually work. But in reading the fact sheet, I wasn't able to illuminate myself.
if I understand, there's remaining 2 years on this Oprah, which was approved by the city related to the property, but I'm looking at either Mr. Pastor or Mr. Buds on the transfer, I guess is the question, being appropriately transferred. Mr. Buds?
Your Honor, and counsel, I'll say the general premise that Councilman Felder has stated at the outset is correct. The idea for the Oprah is that someone that takes an obsolete property that's in need of rehabilitation, the concept is that the taxable value on that can be frozen for up to 12 years. That's what was granted at the time that there was the commitment made to invest. And I think according to the resolution, it was just shy of $420,000 at least into that building. And that there would be then a 12-year freeze essentially on those property taxes going up based on that rehabilitation. And so there are 2 years remaining on that. I think philosophically you could take a few views on that. One is all right, if the prior property owner made the investment, abided by the terms of what's there, essentially letting them continue the benefit of that as part of the transfer of that property to someone else, basically just moving that forward. I would say, generally speaking, that's the way that I would view this, as what was asked to be done was done. The time period that was committed by the city in order to freeze those taxes as an incentive to have that done to the building is in place, and there's 2 years remaining. It's just been the time for that property owner, for whatever reason, to transfer, and so they're asking that basically that benefit carry forward for the remainder of the term that was in place already, based on what was previously approved by the city.
So, yeah, thank you, Your Honor. So I get why we do the Oprahs, and to provide financial relief for someone who's making this significant investment. Sure. But at this point, the ownership of that property is transferred to someone who did not make that investment. So why am I trying to provide financial relief to someone who didn't invest in that property?
Let me, if I may just take a shot at it, I think, I'm guessing that there's probably an expectation of that carrying forward for a couple of years as part of the transaction. It would certainly discount the purchase price, so you functionally get the same benefit of that otherwise. And so, we've transferred these, I think, in the past, as a matter of routine, because they did honor the aspects of what was committed to when it was initially approved. And so in this case here, if we sent signals that we're not going to transfer anything, it'll alter the purchase price, I would imagine, between the two parties, taking that into consideration. But the work was done. And so that's the important, I think, thing from our end of it, why we would recommend to continue the transfer even for the remaining 2 years.
Councilman? Other comments?
It seems, and I'm not a big real estate guy, so maybe that's beyond my purview, but it seems presumptuous to me to include in a contract for sale of a property, to include contingent issues in the contract, in the property value therein, without having them themselves be variable. Why? They're just assuming that council's going to make the action because they have in the past, and that got baked into the purchase price. It's not like if this gets the property rehabilitation, the purchase price is X, otherwise Z. It seems presumptuous to me.
So,
And in this case, we're already, I think, so far down the stream that that our participation our action is at this point expected, one way or another.
I look at it a little differently. We have an agreement that was made years ago for an obsolete property tax benefit, and through the Oprahs it's called, for a period of time that the city came to an agreement that said we will authorize for this facility and for the partnership that we have for a 12-year, I'll just say, abatement of certain taxes. So that's our obligation that we agreed to do. If we're not going to do that, then we should do that up front and say, but if you're going to sell this, that it would eliminate. That's not part of this agreement. I think that there's benefit to ensure the properties are redone, and I think we've had some that I'm trying to think if there's been a case of that where it'd be transferred or not because they weren't doing the work. They've met the expectations with what was in the contract about the amount of investment and what the return is and the benefit to the downtown. In this particular case is on West Front Street. And all three components of those are, since the completion, have been very active, very viable, and from another sense of generating revenue for the community through benefit the downtown and the development authority. So I don't have a problem with the 2 years. Now, had they not met expectations, we'd be having a different discussion. And the person that, I guess that's our agreement up front. It's 12 years, and I'm willing to stand by what we said we do, regardless who the owner is. Other comments?
Your Honor, if I may clarify, I'm not trying to state that the seller in this case has not met the expectations of his upkeep of the building. What I'm trying to state is that there is now a new party, which we had previously had no agreement with.
I understand, but if we start saying, well, we have a 10-year abatement and the person owns it for whatever reason, now they're not going to sell it or finish the work because they know they can't transfer the Oprah to the new person that may come in and finish the project. In this case, the project's done and has benefit. I think we benefit by honoring our agreements up front of a 12-year abatement. If it's said in here if sold, that we would then no longer continue, this is one thing, but that's not what it says. And I think it's been, not just because we've done in the past, there's benefit to that, I believe. Mr. Buds?
Your Honor, I think the other maybe conceptual way that I would at least look at this is that it's sort of a benefit or an obligation or something that runs with the land, essentially. I mean, think about an easement that goes with the property, right? When somebody transfers that property, they don't lose that right to use the easement that transfers with them. I look at this the same way. It's really a, did we get the benefit for the bargain of the tax abatement that we granted for the property, right? And the idea was, if you make this investment, we'll agree to freeze the taxes for this period of time. To me, at least from my way of thinking about it, the who owns it doesn't really matter. Imagine the person that goes in and says, and I guess I'll say conceptually, I would hope we might find more of these people, right? That would say, building with problems downtown, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to buy that, I'm going to rehab it, and my goal is 2 years later to flip it, but I want to be able to have that ability to say, hey, I made this investment to bring this obsolete property back, and the long-term benefit for whomever owns it is that there's going to be that tax freeze for that period of time to essentially recap some of that investment that was put into the property. So I would look at it as something that runs with the property as a benefit to that property for what was done to improve it.
So the tax abatement in this case is an add to the value of the property in our relationship with the property itself, not necessarily the party that owns it.
That would conceptually be how I would look at it.
Other comments or questions?
Your Honor, I would like to move to adopt a proposed resolution supporting the transfer of the obsolete property rehabilitation exemption certificate to the NJ Properties.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Felder, supported by Councilman Lamore. On item 3437, the Oprah exemption certificate transfer resolution. Clerk, please call the roll.
Steelgrave? Yes. Vining?
Yes.
Jermaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes.
All right, I have no other items, Your Honor.
Council comments, it's Councilwoman Steelgrave, first comments.
I would like to congratulate Brian and Barry on the award. Great job, guys. Thank you. And Patrick, thank you for all those wonderful updates on the ice and the flooding. So it's a shame that happened, but you know, Mother Nature, what are we gonna do? Anyway, that's it. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Councilwoman Viney?
Thank you, Your Honor. I received a few phone calls, especially from residents in the Elm Street area, and I heard that the news had been out, a couple news stations, and asking the residents, what does the city plan to do? So I was hoping Patrick could speak to them.
It is on our list. Mr. Pastu was going to speak at that under the manager's time, but we could do it now if you'd prefer. Either way,
I can wait for
you can wait, okay? Because obviously with the ice jam and the impact it's had on our community, it's a good for everyone to hear kind of where we're at with that. That's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up, but yeah, it will be. Other comments?
I don't have any further.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Germaine.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to echo the congratulations to Brian and Barry. Whenever I look at that film, I get emotional because it doesn't even look like Monroe. So great job. Another congratulations to our Mayor Clark for his appointment for the VP of the Michigan Municipal League. Congratulations. And I want to mention that we lost another legacy in our Monroe community. Past President Jerry Welch of the college died last weekend. He was a pillar for the community college and for the community as well. That's all, Your Honor.
Thank you. Councilman Lamore.
Thank you, Your Honor. Once again, I'd like to bounce off of Mickey on that one. My condolences go out to the Welch family. During his tenure, Gerald Welch, as the president of Monroe County Community College, thrived and helped many area residents achieve their goal of obtaining an education and furthering their education. That cannot be understated, because that is something that's a true gift to the area residents. Also, I'd like to commend the DPS and the staff for their vigilance in taking care of the residents during in the flooded areas here, and keeping an eye on everything that's going on. Seems like you guys are, looking at cameras down there or something, because you guys have a better eye on it than anybody else that's driving through. So thank you for keeping them safe and making sure that everything's done that's needed to be done. Also, congratulations to Brian and Barry on the achievement of that award. That is a great award to bring back to the city. Thank you. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you. Councilman Felder.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to thank a few people this evening. Director Tolstead, we'll start with you, and Acting Commander Wall and Acting Captain Smiley, who gave me a comprehensive tour of their facilities, to assess the space available to them in their ongoing operations. Also with the fire department, as the flooding, that's sort of is the big issue of the day, flooding in the downtown on Elm and along the river. The fire department was quick in helping residents get out of their cars and avoid the area. Patrick, thank you for your updates and your department's continuous efforts in active engagement. I know that we had discussions about, all the possible alternatives, and we tried to take a very active role in managing this. We got a hold of the port, so thank you to the Port of Monroe and Paul Lamar, who tried to do what they could to break up the ice down there and relieve some of the pressure off the residents. And then finally to the residents themselves for their patience in our dealing with this issue. I know that I think it was said in some internal emails that this is at least the worst flooding that we've seen in 40 years, and maybe more than that. So it's certainly outstanding circumstances, but I think that the resilience of this community really came through. So thank you for that. That's all I have for this evening, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple comments. I'll follow with a couple of the other council members. Again, my congratulations, Commission on the Environment, Water Quality, all the members, including the councilman, Mr. McAdhirst, as well, Mr. Egan and Barry, and all the members of that, just to make us a better community by the work that is done through that commission, just as we have many other boards and commissions, and thankful for that. I do want to review the past month, of course. Black History Month, we at the Visitor and Education Center, there was a Black Artists of Metropolitan Detroit display. If you have not gone to see it, I strongly recommend that you do. It is still going to be present through February 28th, an opportunity to see some artwork and see the stories of the artists. And last Saturday, there was a presentation, a lecture, and an art presentation. I understand 80 people were present, and just a great message for that was delivered, but also for our community. And I look forward, and I want to thank the Art League, and of course, Lazy Boy helped sponsor that. But I know the Art League is very active in looking how they continue to progress with the Robert Seldon Duckinson legacy here from the city of Monroe, where he resided, and all his great recognition and life of artwork, and how we need to bring that back to life here and plans that they have. So I look forward to those positive steps forward. On the capital improvement and budget plan, I know that Mr. Pastou has sent out again a work session date to have that discussion, just as Councilman Feller had brought up, and some thoughts on that. And I think we all have thoughts on it, and we need to have that scheduled. So please, if you haven't responded, I think we have a new date left to attend, but it's something that probably is better sooner than later, because while we have the concept plan of the budget approved, there is items specific to that we'll need to have some detailed discussion. My condolences also to the Welch family, the passing of Gerald Welch, former president of the Monroe Community College, is lost. Another legacy within the community that did so well and yet was still very active even after when he retired from the college as the president. He would be at many functions and present. Last item I have on the ice jams and the flooding. I know we're going to hear a response from an update, I should say, from the city manager and Mr. Lewis, but I appreciate the information calls and people sending what they're maybe having difficulty with, so we can respond quickly. I know I received an email today, and Mr. Laurie was out there before I was able to actually send it, and went out and met with the residents and saw what their issue was, and maybe some other complications to why there was flooding at the house, which is very few we've had, but it's been the streets and the damage that we've seen there. So my thanks to DPS and the engineering for all the hard work, public safety, fire, and police in the response, and Director Tolstead, the updates and whether they're midnight and early in the morning hours and up to 7 a.m. and then through the day is greatly appreciated, keeping council up to date. I appreciate that. Again, all the residents that are there and all the employees that have participated are my thanks. And please, as the residents continue to make contact so we can address what the needs may be. Clerk Treasurer Lavoy.
I just have 2 comments this evening, Your Honor. We are still accepting property tax payments at the city clerk treasurer's office through February 28th. So there is a penalty for paying now, but it's still better to pay now if you're able to, prior to it going over to the county. So through February 28th, you can still make payments here at the clerk's office. The other item is I'm starting to get quite a few questions about the districts, the new districts that we have because of the changes that have been made due to the census and all of that. I'm working with our GIS asset management specialist here at the city to drill it down so that we have some maps that specifically show where the districts fall in the with the city precincts. So that should be ready fairly soon, and I'm hoping in March to be able to start, not just bring it to council so council can see that picture and utilize that tool with residents who may ask them questions, but I also intend to just be out in the community. I'm probably going to go to a couple places, set up a little table with a cup of coffee, and if there's any residents that have questions, and we'll let everyone know about that. But if there's because sometimes somebody doesn't want to come to City Hall or it's not part of their regular schedule, so I thought it'll take some time because this is really important, and we do have a change here in the city with regard to with one of our precincts won't be in the same district as some of our other precincts. So I want to be able to make sure that the residents have a chance to see the maps and understand them as best I can explain them to them. So just want to let you know that that's in the works in case you get any questions. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Pastu?
Thank you, Your Honor. Just echo appreciation for staff. I certainly want to recognize Mr. Lamar for his effort trying to bring a tug up to try and break that ice jam up, but also our new county emergency management director, John Conlon. Both Mr. Lewis and I have had conversations with him, and certainly he's trying to find assistance that we can to mitigate the impact of this flooding. But also Director Tolstead, Public Safety Commander J.D. Long, Communications Director Jody Egan for a tireless weekend of staying on top of media requests and providing responses, as well as Mr. Lewis. All of them were engaged in that interaction with the media, keeping them updated. So I'll ask Patrick to give a quick update related to where we are as of late this afternoon. We still got a ways to go before we can take a deep breath, but I'll have Patrick give you an update as to where we are at.
Certainly. Honorable Mayor and Council, Patrick Lewis, Director of Engineering and Public Services. I'll try to make this a little shorter than one of my emails that I wrote to you last few days here. Sorry about that. I try to intersperse short with long. So as far as the answer for where we are right now, we're cautiously optimistic based on what we saw develop this afternoon. There was some movement in developing a little flow channel on the south bank. Near the south bank of the river under the Winchester Street Bridge. There's flowing water in some areas. It's not continuous from upstream to downstream of the ice pack, but there was quite a bit of movement. The ice pack itself consolidated quite a bit today. It moved from essentially the middle of Soldiers and Sailors Park all the way down to the water plant. So what that means is there's a lot of water pushing it from upstream, and hopefully if it's in a smaller concentrated area, it'll cause some things to pop and shift, and if we can just get a couple of little relief flow channels in there, that'll help. Problem is we've only got about 12 more hours until the temperatures are going to drop below freezing, so we wouldn't expect to get much more softening. But we saw quite a bit of softening of the ice today, and we're somewhat hopeful because between like 1 and 4, that channel developed. So it was moving quickly today to have some improvement on that. Obviously, we're getting into a longer range forecast with temperatures hovering around the freezing mark, probably the average daily temperature there. So I wouldn't expect much change, although the force of that moving water should still help us, like I said, hopefully erode some channels. If we can just get part or all of this packed down to Hellenberg Field, we should be free of most of the major impacts on our residents. The flooding areas, surprisingly, and this tells you something about the movement of water underneath the ice, even though the river's risen to almost 12 feet at the flood gauge, which is basically the third highest crest we've ever had, and we're getting close to the second highest crest here. The street flooding has actually subsided a lot more. Elm was open briefly for about an hour and a half yesterday, and then it sloshed back in there. We had to close it again. But Front Street's open. What that means, I think, is that the water that we believe is flowing to some degree underneath that ice is relieving itself in multiple places now, and it's not causing sort of a siphon effect into those neighborhoods. So the hope is that over the coming days here, maybe we've turned the corner on the street flooding at least. There is certainly still a danger, and that is if the ice does lock up with the colder temperatures and we get some type of precipitation event before another warming period, that we could still have some degree of challenges where it could still rise further. We don't think that's likely, but anything is possible because with what we've learned and what I've learned in my 24 years here is no two events are similar. The question of what we have done and what we can do and what we will do is a complicated one. We mentioned, and I greatly appreciate the assistance of Mr. Lamar at the Port of Monroe because he is obviously our first call, and he's the one that's got the expertise with bringing in maritime equipment. That said, we're challenged to get to where the pack is here. The Coast Guard cutter that we've called in the past, as well as some larger tugboats, which is what we actually had clear that, or I should say he arranged to have that cleared, can get to about the turning basin at the port. And then you need a smaller vessel that can get from there to about just downstream of Hellenberg Field. The challenge with that is it still doesn't quite get us to where we are, to where you can actually start breaking where the chunks are jammed up. And there is a danger now of if you were to bring in that vessel, and we are still looking to see if that's available. And that's what Mr. Conlon was talking to the Michigan State Police. And Wayne County is looking for a smaller tug for us that we might use if this continues. But the challenge is if the closer you get to the ice pack, if you clear out enough that it causes that to move suddenly, now you've got a tugboat operator in peril. And those are the things that we are concerned about. Obviously, we've heard comments and remarks made of things that were done in the past, the old days of dynamiting, wrecking balls, and that nature. I would highly recommend against any of those functions. They're not appropriate for an urban environment, really, particularly in the vicinity of this jam, because as I pointed out before, you have, I've said 3 bridges. There's actually 4 bridges because the 2 tracks are kind of together, Norfolk Southern, Canadian National. You've got 4 bridges, sanitary sewers on both banks underneath, and the raw water intake line, 2 of them, in the nearby vicinity. So I don't think we want to start blowing holes that might cause problems in those areas. So it's frustrating because there's a belief that the city can and should be doing something to break up the jam, and where it is, there's not a lot we can do. But what we can do is kind of continue to monitor conditions, continue to look out for that street flooding, making sure the barricades are in the right places, our public safety staff assisting with rescues, and investigating where we can. I know Mr. Leroy took at least one call on that one. We've had a lot of basement flooding calls. The cause is really self-evident, and there's not a lot we can do with that, much like there isn't with the flooding. But so I don't know if I can give an answer to what we're going to do for the residents specifically, other than again, monitor the situation and see if we have any other concerns of additional flooding or God forbid, some evacuations if it were to get significantly worse. But those are the things that we're focused mostly on. And just, again, trying to provide the council and the media where we can with as accurate information as we have, understanding it's a very fluid, pardon the pun, situation here, but it's constantly changing. And I would expect come tomorrow morning, it'll be significantly different than it is now. It'll either lock up on the cold, or maybe we'll get a channel poke through and maybe we can start to relieve this. But that's essentially where we are at this moment in time.
I'll ask if there's any specific questions for Mr. Lewis. I know that Mr. Leroy's here as well, but I know in the conversations they've had with residents that may have water in their home is the site visits are beneficial because it allows a conversation with the homeowner to make a determination if there's some disconnect that needs to be occurred as well. And of course, as we all know, we also share with the residents is that we do have a program through the water wastewater program for a disconnect benefit, a shared cost, but also a timeline of how that's paid. So if that is the case, I strongly encourage the residents to make sure they contact Mr. Leroy through the wastewater department about those opportunities at some funding in support, and then how their payments can be made in support of eliminating the problem for the future. And I'm not saying that's the case for all of them. We know that, but when we find that or believe that's what it is, we ask residents to please at least make the contact so you can make an informed decision whether you wish to do the disconnect program to stop some backups. So.
Absolutely. The only other thing I wanted to add, Your Honor, that I forgot was that kudos to Waste Management that actually made it through the Elm Avenue flooding. That we'd kind of warned them Sunday that they probably wouldn't be able to get there, and then we'd have to skip some homes and come back and make some provisions whereby, like, DPS would come back and pick it up, and we'd try to give them. We know they've suffered a lot and been through a lot, so we want to try to give them the opportunities to dispose of those items, and we're not going to start getting picky about what the pile looks like. But Waste Management looks like they came through and picked up just about everything that was out there, and they were able to get through those neighborhood streets. And so I wanted to give credit to them for that, for additional effort, and we'll continue that. I mean, the city has unlimited collection with practical limits. I mean, we're not going to let you throw out what appears to be an eviction or a move out, but we know that, and certainly in these areas, we're going to have an excess quantity of material here. Waste Management is prepared for that, and they may even put another truck on next Monday. Same type of thing on the south side of the river for Thursday's area, the areas that were affected last week. It'll be the same type of thing. So any concerns about that, if you have additional refuse that wasn't picked up, give our office a call, Department of Public Services, and as the week or so goes on here, we'll talk about making additional provisions if it's necessary to do a sweep ourselves.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Before I go to public or citizens' comments, I had one thank you that I wanted to put on here, and I know that it's been said by others, but through this whole time, our communications director, Jody Egan, and staying up with the contact with all the various news agencies that may be calling, making the right connections to whether it be the public safety, fire, police, staff, and to get the information shared that's coming through in the conversation she has with city managers as well, and others, to make sure that she's putting out our communications of what we're doing, and so people have awareness. And so I want to say thank you to her as well. So with that, citizens' comments. So at this time, just as I always review the kind of the rules of the chamber, if you have comments made this evening, please be mindful of your time of 3 minutes. And if you would, your name and jurisdiction of residence is appreciated. So at this time, comments. I know we have some that are speaking here this evening. So comments this evening, yes, sir. Please come forward. Your name and residence jurisdiction. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Wayne Blank. I live at 5019 Skylark Drive, Monroe Township. I'm sorry. Just a little mistake there. Actually, why I'm here is asking for permission to do a Veterans Day parade in Monroe. Mm-hmm. We've got one in the county in Luna Pier, and I started that about 5-6 years ago. I would like to ask permission to do one on November 12th in Monroe, in the city of Monroe. So it would be on a Saturday, the day after the Veterans Day. It would be starting from the Monroe Garage, Monroe on Jones Avenue and then ending at St. Mary's Park. I've got quite a committee set up here. I got Will Bruck, Brian Merkel, Ralph Woodbury, Joe Bellino, Ken Moore, Jim Karras, Al Bond from the VFW. So I think I've got a very stable committee, and they're all veterans. They all belong to the veterans community in Monroe, one way or the other. If they're not veterans, they belong to military families and vice versa. So I would just like to ask your permission to go forward. I am very, very dedicated to veterans. I think everybody knows that. I've done a lot of things in the veterans community, and I think this is probably the next step. Monroe hasn't had one. I get a lot of questions from people. Why doesn't Monroe do one? A Veterans Day parade. So I'm asking for your permission to start planning this and work with the city and be able to put on a very successful parade and maybe even bring some money downtown, to the vendors down there. So.
Well, thank you, Wayne. I'd say it's not necessarily the council says yes, needs permission to go do it. There's a simple process. It's a one-pager, if I'm not mistaken. Request for parade. I know that Pat Weaver, our assistant, she kind of champions that, but it's a simple form to be filled out. And then we do a staff analysis. It's not that it's detailed, but, public safety from a police and fire, what the needs may be, DPS, the date and just more logistics than it is anything else. But,
Right.
As you know, we have some parades in the city, so it's not like we don't allow parades. We do. And it's really just getting it on the agenda earliest as possible. You're here today, which is well early before November. So I would say, start right off by filling that out. And then once we get it through, then we'll talk about it and have meetings together with yourself or members of the committee to kind of really what you're looking for and what else might be part of the parade. So we welcome that, but we just more procedural process. And if you need that number, I know you can get from the city manager here today, the right number to call. So, or even through email is fine. But
I
we'll talk.
basically have looked at that on the
Oh, good.
website, and I just wanted to make sure that, where to start here. So
Yep.
I don't want to burn my wheels and not get it accepted, so.
Well, we've approved parades, and it's just more just getting it through the process. So look forward to seeing that and working together. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate it, sir.
All right.
Thank you, thank you.
Mr. Yep. Other comments from those? Yes, sir. Name and jurisdiction of residence. Thank you.
Okay, hello, I'm Blake Howell. I live at 633 Godfrey Avenue, Monroe. And I'm here to speak out against the deployment of 5G. 5G uses all the frequencies currently being used by cell phone towers, so between 800 megahertz to 6 gigahertz plus. 5G also can use 6 gigahertz all the way to 300 gigahertz. So with 5G, the FCC is allowing telecommunications companies to utilize almost the entire radio frequency spectrum, even though these same telecommunications companies admit they have not done any safety testing for any of these frequencies. Dr. Paul Heroics is a professor at McGill University who teaches toxicology and health effects of electromagnetic radiation, who summarizes it nicely by saying there is scientifically evidence that is so strong that you can be certain that the standards used by the FCC to manage health effects are wrong. There are actually over 30,000 peer-reviewed scientific publications that prove cell phone towers and many other electronic devices cause severe health problems, including cancer, blood disorders, memory loss, dizziness, anxiety, decreased ability to concentrate, irritability, headaches, nosebleeds, fatigue, cardiomyopathy, eye damage, fertility issues, tinnitus, insomnia, and pineal gland disruption. There are no insurance companies who are willing to insure against the health problems caused by cell phone towers or Wi-Fi or any other device. Market values for properties decline drastically after 5G transmitters are installed next to the property, which shows that people do not even want 5G. The cell phone towers and chemtrails are what's really making people sick. In my opinion, we should work towards connecting our devices with wires instead of shooting harmful radiation. And you'd be heroes for successfully banning 5G. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. Thank you for your comments.
All right.
All right. Other comment? Yes, sir. Mr. Parker?
Good evening to this body of city leadership. My name is William Parker, 501 Clark Street, Monroe, Michigan, as I'm coming in as the NAACP president. I heard you guys talking about the bridge today. I'm coming in behalf of that bridge because there's a lot of citizens with questions about the bridge. I know that you guys allocated, I think, $100,000 for the bridge. I anticipated that it was going to be more than $100,000 because when dealing with infrastructure like that, I know it was more than just painting and replacing a few boards. I'm come just asking, have you guys actively tried to secure any other funds? I heard you tonight talking about grants. Are you guys trying to actively secure any other funds that you can get the bridge fixed? And are you anticipating fixing that bridge this year in 2022, or is it going to be next year, 2023, to get that bridge fixed?
Well, Mr. Parker, I appreciate your comments because it's something that as we allocated the funds and then Mr. Pastu talked about the additional, I guess we're in the start of where else we may find funds that might assist with that. Or is there funds that of our projects that may be available? I know there's a design aspect to it, but I'm going to leave Mr. Pastu the ability because from the technical sense, he can kind of give us where we're going.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just in all candor, it's probably at the earliest would be a 2023. As the mayor alluded, there's going to be some design considerations that go into it. And those are, several months of work and then bidding and then even finding a contractor. That's assuming we got the cash now. We're just starting to look at some funding alternatives for the project itself. The fact that it came back, it's pretty nice, concepts that came back for that, and I think it fits with some of the state and federal programs out there related to transportation mobility. That's one of the considerations for on each end of the bridge, as well as just its importance. I think connecting one side of downtown with St. Mary's Park. So, but to be realistic, I think the earliest it would happen would be 2023. But we are definitely interested in pursuing it. So,
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. As a follow-up, we talked also internally when we talk about the internal sources. I talked about the Trails Committee. I still not sure that is even a feasible part to it. But go ahead, Mr. Pastu.
I'm just shaking. Yeah, that's a question to be probably engage our city attorney with that, because that would be local funds that we potentially could push it along quicker, but still, from a design standpoint, I think realistically 2023. But now that it's on the radar and in the CIP, that I forgot about the trail end of it. But that would potentially be a source of funding with the millage.
Right, with the millage, and does it fit? Does it fit within the definition? We would not obviously would not want to do that if it didn't fit. But if it did, it might be that as we talked about the revenue moving forward on the trails, how maybe that's a component as we work on that. And every bit helps. And if we can, whether it be federal or state funding that's coming through, that there's so much that's available, and just to find the right match that the funds that we have, use that to leverage a grant as part of the conversation now. But we got to get the design work done as well, because it's there's the environmental side. We our recognition on the Commission on Environment, last thing we do is scrape and have it fall in the river. But that's probably a cost add-on issue as well. We want to make sure it's done right. So I appreciate you being here. I know that the council members, a couple of us has started asking, well, when did the bridge come? We think with the champions that brought that forward. I know there was more than one, but I just recall Miss Edwards and her day in here on how she brought some of that along with others, and why the importance of having our bridge. But it's on our list. Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you being here. Other comments from those present here this evening? Further comments? I see no other comments. Motion to adjourn. Please.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Councilman Lamore, supported by Councilman Felder to adjourn. Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes.
Yes.
Clark.
Yes. Thank you all.